I want to start with some personal news. I will be leaving CNN in April. Let me back up. After most of my 20s working my way up in local news, I came to this network in 2008.
Imagine spending 20 years building something. Not a business, not a product, but a face, a voice, a presence that millions of people invited into their homes every single morning before the coffee finished brewing. You become part of their routine, part of their lives, sometimes part of their children's earliest memories of watching the news with a parent. And then one day, without warning, the phone rings or someone walks into your office or a statement goes out to the press before you even have a chance to call your family. And just like that, all of it is gone. The chair is empty. Your name disappears from the rundown. And the audience that watched you for 2 decades moves on by the following Monday, because the show does not stop for anyone. This is what happens to television news anchors when they fall. And what makes these stories genuinely worth paying attention to is not the fall itself. It is everything that comes after. Because some of these people tried to come back and succeeded in ways nobody expected. Some tried and failed completely. Some did not try at all and seemed to accept that the version of their life they had built was simply over. And a few of them landed somewhere so far outside the world of broadcast journalism that if you told someone watching them at their peak, they would not have believed you. What follows is the full picture of what actually happened to some of the most recognizable anchors in American television history after the cameras stopped pointing at them. And Curry's story is one that still generates strong feelings among people who followed it closely, and the reason is straightforward. She did not do anything wrong. She was not fired for dishonesty. She was not let go because her ratings had collapsed or because audiences had stopped trusting her. She was removed from the co-host seat at the Today Show in 2012 after roughly 1 year in the role, and the reason, according to reporting from multiple journalists who covered NBC at the time, was internal politics more than anything she had done or failed to do on air. Curry had spent 15 years building her reputation at NBC before she ever sat in that co-host chair. She came up through the network covering international stories and humanitarian crises, the kind of reporting that requires a journalist to actually care about the subjects they are covering rather than simply performing concern for the camera. Audiences responded to her because she appeared genuine, and she appeared genuine because she was. By the time she was elevated to co-host alongside Matt Lauer in 2011, she had the credibility and the experience to justify the role. What she did not have, apparently, was the full support of the colleagues sitting next to her. Multiple accounts from inside the network described Lauer as unhappy with the pairing, and in the environment that existed at NBC's morning program at that time, his opinion carried enough weight to matter to the people making decisions. In June of 2012, NBC moved her out of the seat. The goodbye she delivered on air was visibly painful, and many viewers who watched it described it as uncomfortable to witness because it was so obviously not something she had wanted to say. NBC kept her on as a correspondent after that, which was framed externally as a continuation of her career at the network. But the correspondent role did not give her the platform or the assignments that matched what she had been doing before. She stayed in that position until 2015, then left NBC entirely. She went on to host documentary work, including 2 seasons of a PBS series called We'll Meet Again, which reunited people separated by historical events, and a single season of a medical series on TNT. Both projects were meaningful, but neither gave her back the daily national audience she had spent 15 years earning. As of mid-2026, she has not returned to morning television. She has said she would be open to it. The invitation has not arrived. Her career is not over, but the specific place she occupied in American television has not come back to her, and that loss was not one she brought on herself. It was handed to her by the internal mechanics of a network where someone with more institutional power decided the arrangement did not work for him. Brian Williams is one of the most complicated cases on this list, and also one of the most instructive, because what ended his career was not misconduct toward other people. It was a story he told about himself that turned out not to be accurate. Williams took over the anchor chair at NBC Nightly News in 2004 when Tom Brokaw stepped down after nearly 25 years in the role. That transition could have been rocky. It was not. Over the following decade, Williams built the broadcast into the most watched evening news program in the country, a position it held with consistency. His combination of genuine authority and an unusual ability to be funny in a setting that usually does not permit humor made him one of the most recognized journalists in America. The story that changed everything involved his coverage of the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Williams had described on multiple occasions being on a military helicopter that came under fire and was forced to land. Veterans who had been present during those events challenged the account publicly in 2015, saying Williams had not been on the aircraft that was fired upon. He had been on a different helicopter that arrived in the area afterward. When this discrepancy became the subject of reporting, Williams retracted his account and acknowledged that his memory of what had happened was wrong. NBC suspended him without pay for 6 months while the network conducted a full review. During that review, additional questions emerged about statements he had made regarding his experiences covering Hurricane Katrina, including claims about witnessing conditions that others who were present disputed. The conclusion the network reached was that Williams had developed a pattern of embellishing his own role in events he had covered. He did not return to NBC Nightly News. The network reassigned him to MSNBC to complete the remaining years of his contract, where he hosted a late-night program that ran until his deal ended in 2021. The show had an audience, but it never occupied the same cultural space as the evening news broadcast he had anchored. When his contract concluded, he left. What happened after that has been more interesting than most people anticipated. Williams became a volunteer firefighter in New Jersey, which is a genuine commitment of time and physical effort rather than a symbolic gesture. He hosted an election night special for Amazon's Prime Video in November 2024. And in April 2026, Netflix announced a podcast project with him, suggesting that at least one major media platform believes his voice and his perspectives still carry value with an audience. His fall was real and significant, but his story does not appear to be finished. The case of Matt Lauer is categorically different from the others on this list, and it is important to be clear about why. Lauer was not removed from the Today Show in November 2017 because of a professional disagreement or because his ratings had softened. He was fired within 24 hours of NBC receiving a formal complaint from a female colleague alleging inappropriate workplace conduct. Additional accounts from other women followed in the days and weeks after his termination was announced. The details that emerged were serious, and the volume of accounts from multiple individuals across a period of years placed his situation in a different category from an anchor who lost their job over an editorial dispute. NBC's statement confirming his firing went out early on a November morning, and his co-anchors had to address the news live on the same broadcast he had co-anchored for 2 decades. The discomfort of that morning was visible to everyone watching. After that, Lauer was effectively invisible for an extended period. He was not photographed publicly until nearly 2 years after the story broke. Reports during that time placed him at his home in the Hamptons, largely withdrawn from the social and professional world he had occupied for so long. People who had known him said he had minimal contact with former colleagues. By 2023, reporting suggested his personal life had stabilized somewhat, including a rebuilt relationship with his children and time spent at property he owns in New Zealand. His professional life, however, has not recovered in any visible or documented way. There is no media project, no planned return, no indication that any platform is considering bringing him back. Of all the disappearances on this list, his is the most complete, and given what was documented about his conduct, it is also the one that has generated the least public sympathy. Charlie Rose occupied a genuinely unusual position in American television. His PBS interview program, which ran for more than 2 decades, was not attempting to attract the largest possible audience. It was attempting to have the most substantive possible conversations with the most significant figures in politics, business, science, arts, and culture. He largely succeeded. The show had a reputation for depth and seriousness that very few television formats at any point in broadcasting history have matched. He also co-anchored CBS This Morning, which gave him a mainstream morning presence in addition to his late-night public broadcasting work. In November 2017, The Washington Post published an investigation documenting allegations from 8 women who described inappropriate behavior on his part, ranging from unwanted physical contact to conduct that went beyond that. CBS, PBS, and Bloomberg, the 3 organizations he worked with, all ended their partnerships with him within days. More women came forward after the initial report, eventually raising the total number of accusers to more than 30. Rose issued a statement acknowledging that some of the accounts were accurate while disputing others, and maintained that his understanding of the situations had been different from the accounts being described. The professional response was essentially total. His programs were pulled from their respective platforms. His contracts were terminated. The reputation he had spent more than 20 years building in serious journalism was dismantled within a matter of weeks. Reports from early 2018 placed him at his home on Long Island, avoiding contact with neighbors who had previously been friendly toward him. He has made some attempts to maintain a presence, including posting interview content on his personal website, but the reach of those efforts is minimal compared to what he commanded when major broadcast organizations were behind him. No television network has expressed interest in bringing him back in any capacity. His case is one of the most complete professional endings on this list. Steve Kometko's story is different in nature from the others here, and in some ways it is the most quietly devastating, because the original mistake was so small relative to the consequences it produced. He spent nearly a decade as one of the most visible faces at E! News, from 1994 to 2002, interviewing major celebrities and covering the entertainment industry with genuine warmth and knowledge. He was genuinely good at the job, and his audience knew it. His firing came from a single decision made during a contract renegotiation. He encouraged viewers on his personal website to write letters to the network in support of his contract renewal. The network asked him directly whether he had used a company computer to make that post. He said no. He had used a company computer. When the network confirmed this, they used the lie as the basis for his termination. What followed the firing was a years-long experience of being effectively unhireable at any competing network, because his identity had become so specific to E! that nobody else wanted to bring him in. He eventually moved to Chicago to be closer to his aging parents and took a job at an Apple store. He has described that period in interviews as one that included years of heavy drinking as he tried to manage the gap between where his career had been and where it now was. He got sober around 2016. Since then, he has built a podcast called Still Here Hollywood, where he interviews people connected to the entertainment world and speaks candidly about his own experiences, including the sobriety and the years that preceded it. The audience he reaches through that project is much smaller than what he had at his peak at E!, but the conversations he is having are arguably more honest than much of what he did on television. The story he tells now, about what happened to him and what it cost him, is more complete than the persona he presented on E! News ever was. Terry Moran's exit from ABC News in 2025 was one of the more unusual ones in recent broadcast history, because it happened fast, it was entirely public, and he chose not to walk it back. Moran had spent decades at ABC as a senior national correspondent, building a reputation as a serious and experienced journalist. He posted a message on social media late one night criticizing the president and a senior White House official in language that his network considered a violation of its editorial standards for journalists. ABC suspended him immediately and fired him 2 days later. Moran acknowledged afterward that he had been drinking when he made the post. He also made clear that he stood by the substance of what he had said and that he had no significant regrets about the content itself. Most journalists in his position would have issued a careful apology and attempted to preserve whatever professional bridges remained. Moran did not take that approach. He was consistent about the fact that the post reflected what he actually believed, which closed certain doors while simultaneously demonstrating a kind of intellectual consistency that his defenders noted had always characterized his work. Since his firing, he launched a Substack newsletter focused on political commentary. By May 2026, it had accumulated around 110,000 subscribers, which is a legitimate audience by the standards of independent political writing, but a significant step